So thank you for coming out this evening. My name is Jessica Knapp, and I'm the Online Engagement Coordinator at Canada's History Society, and I will be your host for tonight's webinar. Tonight, Paul Dick will be speaking about the intersection of history and art in theater. With his experience as the artistic director for SALON Theatre Productions and as a historical actor for many years, he has the credentials to speak on this topic, as does everyone, because we're all participants of the intersection of history and art, whether we're viewing it or whether we're acting upon it, acting in it, or if we just have an opinion, we can all share it. So that's what we can do here tonight. So say what you think, ask the questions you've been wanting to ask, whether it's something that a movie brought up or a play brought up, what any of those. I think Paul will be able to, whether or not he will answer your question, I'm sure he will be able to speak to it. So before I hand everything over to Paul tonight, I'm going to tell you a bit about Canada's History Society. We are a national charitable organization dedicated to making Canadian history popular for a general audience. We do this in a number of ways, including our flagship publications, Canada's History Magazine, formerly known as The Beaver, and Kayak, Canada's History Magazine for Kids. If you're interested in learning more about those magazines, you can click on the links on the screen. They will bring you to them, and definitely consider subscribing because they're excellent. Canada's History is also responsible for awarding the Governor-General's History Awards, and in particular, the Governor-General's History Award for community programming. This award aims to inspire small volunteer-led community organizations in the creation of innovative programming that commemorates unique aspects of our heritage. Each year, 2 projects are awarded $2,500 and a trip for 2 to Ottawa to receive their award at the Governor-General's History Awards ceremony at Rideau Hall. The deadline for this award is August 1st. If you're interested in knowing more about these awards, this award in particular, feel free to click on the link and bookmark it for later viewing. It should bring you right to our awards page, and you can see all the awards that we actually give out, including this Community Programming Award. So just a few tips and tricks for the webinar this evening. Hopefully we will avoid any technical difficulties, but I can assure you they will creep in, whether sooner rather than later, hopefully, so we can get them out of the way. We are recording the webinar, and I'm pretty good at video editing, so any issues that we do have here tonight, I'm sure I can get rid of, and the recording will be seamless. So if you are wanting to watch it again because you had some difficulty tonight, definitely look for that email about the recording announcement. If you're on social media, I definitely encourage you to spread the word about tonight's webinar. You can simply share the link that you received in the email, and anybody who sees it can just join us right in the chat room, and there's no need to register last minute and to wait for those emails. If you have any questions during the webinar, ask right away as they come to you. You no need to save it until the end. We are using the chat box, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, and Paul will be able to respond to your questions verbally, so hit them hard. I will also be sending a survey around to all those who registered for tonight's webinar, and I would really appreciate your feedback about both the technical aspects as well as the content. And I would appreciate your feedback, whether you're watching it live tonight or at a recording in the future. So that's my introduction tonight, keeping it pretty simple. And I would like to hand everything over to Paul. So he's going to introduce himself as I load up his presentation. Take it away, Paul.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jessica. I hope everyone can hear me right now. Can't, then We're gonna have a problem. I don't have the best internet connection right now, but I found a. Okay, awesome. Looks like I can be heard. I'm just in a hotel right now, the Maverick Motor Inn in Kamloops, British Columbia. So we're actually currently on tour right now, touring a show about Canadian history that we're doing about Sir John A. Macdonald, actually called The Trial of Sir John A. Macdonald. So it's a bit of an interesting show, a little bit more adult than we usually do it, although it plays really well to grades 4 to 7. That's usually our ideal audience, but it gets them to interact very critically with the legacy of Sir John A. Macdonald, as we've been doing with a lot of our work in the past 3 years or so. So yeah, as Jessica mentioned, I work for Salon Theatre, which is a theatre company based in Kingston, Ontario, also John A. Macdonald's hometown. Um, and I started out as a tour guide there, a costume tour guide, leading walking tours on Sir John A. Macdonald and his friendly band of characters, and then moved up to a touring member of the company, and then going on my 4th year now at the company. Just recently been appointed the artistic director of the company, actually, in light of our executive producer Jim Gerard, who just retired about a month or so back. I want to take this time as well to just say that if anyone has any issues with hearing me or any audibility issues, just let me know in the chat box or whatnot. And as Jessica mentioned, any questions, feel free to just fire ahead. I'll probably just save them until the end to speak to them, unless something jumps out at me right away. But yeah, so I guess we'll get going. The name of my show here is, or the title of it is going to be "To Know Where You're Going, You Have to Know Where You've Been." And that's actually a line from a song that we had in a musical that we did last winter, a show that we toured out east for 3 weeks to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. And that was a line at the end, it's sort of a wrap-up song. And it was written by one of my cast members here, Anna Sudak, who's brilliant girl, and the longest standing member with the company. But that line just always stuck out to me, and whenever I'm summing up what we have to do and what our mission is and why we do what we do, it always comes back to that line there. To know where you're going, you have to know where you've been. I think it just sums it up completely well. And obviously I'm going to be talking about some of the work we do at the intersection of history and art. That's where we create works, at the intersection of history and art. So hence the byline, where history meets art, an essential marriage, because in my opinion, I really think that linking history with art, with performance, with theater, with music is really the essential way to learn it. I mean, the youth are never that engaged in our history, which is a shame, and I'll speak to that in a little bit. But when you link anything with music or any kind of art or performance, it usually becomes a lot more engaging, a lot more palatable, especially to younger audiences often. So get going now in here. Yeah, just touching on basically what we do. I mentioned a little bit of it right now. We're Salon Theatre, and we've been doing a project called Sir John A. 2015 for the last, it started in about 2008, but last 3 years we'll be ramping up in preps for the 200th birthday, which was this year, and we are still in it actually. But we like to focus on Canadian heritage and history. That's where we create all our works. It's all historical theatre. And we're dedicated to creating works that engage students and Canadians of all ages in where we came from. And again, like I said, we create these works with heavy multimedia aspect, heavy performance aspect, heavy musical aspect to it, to make it that much more palatable, at least in my opinion, hopefully, and with some of the feedback I've seen over my last 4 years or so of the company, it really does work, and I'll speak to that too as well. But in addition to that, I mean, we're a fluid, flexible, portable theater company. We like to think, we don't perform in traditional theaters. We perform everywhere, from school gyms to train compartments to churches, outdoors, front steps of buildings, concert halls, wherever pretty much. We can wrap up what we do, package it, and adapt it to almost any situation, which makes us a really sort of flexible and versatile theater company. So in addition to engaging the youth about what our history is, where we came from, something else we've recently hopped onto more is getting Canadians, especially the youth, engaged in our system of government and form of governance, which is of course democracy. And it's really a great privilege to live in a democratic society like we do now. And There's people, it's lost on people. They don't take full advantage of it. Voter turnout is as low as it's ever been. And there doesn't seem to be any change in that trend. So we try and do this by inserting participatory portions in our shows, especially the school shows that we tour. This one recently, like I said, the trial of Sir John A, which there's actually a picture of in the bottom corner of this slide, if you're able to see it, of us all in white suspenders there. There's actually a voting portion in the show where we create a trial where John A. Macdonald unexpectedly gets put on trial. And he faces off against 3 witnesses. The first witness is Hugh Allen on the charge of cheating. The second witness is a settler named Mary Louisa Cummins, who speaks about misleading. And the third witness is a surprise witness until the very end, which is actually Louis Riel. He speaks on the charge of mistreating. It's all against the people of Canada. And after every charge, actually, the audience, the kids get a chance to vote. Is he guilty or is he not guilty? And we've had some interesting results on that front. I mean, we've done about 17, 18 shows as of right now, and there's never been a clean sweep of guilty or not guilty. It's always mixed, and every vote is never unanimous. There's always some people that don't know, aren't sure. Sometimes he's definitely guilty, sometimes he's definitely not guilty, but there's always a large variety. But what's interesting to note a few times, though, is when sometimes these kids don't vote. And this is usually on the older age spectrum, the high school kids, as you get past grade 8, the kids get a little bit, as we like to say, a little bit too cool for musical theater, a little bit too cool for history, for participating. I mean, as if anyone knows any high school kids, or maybe you have some kids as yourself, and I wasn't that long ago in high school, although I was never one of the kids who was, too cool for that kind of stuff. I mean, I always participated and loved to, but it's not always the most fashionable thing to be into something or show excitement. So it's hard to get into those kids, but they didn't actually vote this past high school we went to. They didn't get into it as much. So very few people put up their hands, and we spoke to that after and said, it was interesting that one of the pieces of our mandate is to inform people of our system of government, get them engaged in the democratic process, and yet here you are, the future of Canada right now, and you're not voting. And if this is any kind of indication of what you're going to do as soon as you reach voting age, I worry about what the future of Canada is going to be, because it's fighting. It's all about fighting voter apathy. And that apathy is pretty much, it can be a recipe to a dystopia, to a society that you don't want. So you want to make sure that you have a say in what happens, and you don't think a vote matters. I mean, there's hundreds of examples out there throughout history of where one vote mattered. I think didn't Adolf Hitler get elected with one vote or something like that initially to lead the party? So there's a ton of examples, So it's really a shame when you see kids not voting. But so that's one of our big things, is trying to reach them and show them, to be engaged. It's cool to be engaged. It's fun to be engaged. You can have a say. Do your research. Do your civil duty. I mean, that's part of the privilege of democracy, is you have that privilege. I mean, so you should never take advantage of it or take it for granted. And again, what we do is we do theater, performance, music, media, like I mentioned. Hopefully, if Jessica can get a few of these clips loaded up at the end, then we might be able to take a look at some of our work. But otherwise, there's lots of avenues to view that online, which I'll speak to after. But again, it's just about engaging the youth. I mentioned them specifically. It's about engaging all Canadians in their heritage and history and where we came from. But most of all, the youth, because they're the young, moldable minds that are going to be leading our future. And the future can be really bright. So it's all about engaging them. And I want to speak, about a little bit about why learn history, why history. People ask us, it's not the most popular form of theater, historically based theater, especially one with an educational bent. I mean, of course, there's dramas based upon history, but really, about learning about history, that's not really done as much. So we think we have a bit of a niche in that, but to be honest, history is essential, and I've been hammering home that point since the beginning, and I'm going to continue to hammer it home. And like I said, to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been. The past informs the present and consequently the future. I like to bring up to people is that the Canada we're living in today is not all that different from the Canada that John A. Macdonald and the fellow Fathers of Confederation brought together in 1867. I mean, on the world stage, we're a relatively young country. So we have the benefit of having at least modern Canadian history as we know it. I mean, let's not forget that there was much history that came before 1867. There's Indigenous history, there's other history of the settlers, of the Loyalists and such. So the history of the land goes back, many, many, many years. But if we're looking at the history of a confederated Canada for almost the last 150 years, we got the 150th coming up in 2017. There's not much has changed if you look at in a general sense. I mean, I like to bring up that Confederation, for instance, is still as contentious an issue now as it was in 1867. I mean, we still have, the Easterners, the Maritimes with the chip on their shoulder. We still have the Western separatist movement, that feels like they should have their own country, their economy is thriving. We have Quebec separatist movement, of course, that has been always bubbling on the surface, this contentious relationship they have with the rest of English Canada. We have, we have Indigenous issues. We have Native policy. There's still problems on that front. There were problems then, with the building of the railway. There's still problems now, as we're seeing. There's still a French and English divide, for instance. Speaking about the language divide, I mean, obviously, I just mentioned Quebec and their intention to separate in the last 20 or so years. But for instance, also don't forget, it alienates the West. I mean, I was just having a few drinks in a bar with, I was talking to this guy in Creston, BC, just a couple days ago. And he started talking about, a bunch of different things about how the West views the East/Central Canada, what they think of Ottawa. And he got talking about, Ottawa coming in and pillaging the land for the resources and stripping it away, that's how they feel it goes down now. And of course, one could argue that's how it went down in the 1870s rather, when the railroad was being built out there. But he talked about the biggest divide for him was the language, which is strange. He says, this whole bilingual thing that Trudeau brought in. He didn't seem like he was the biggest fan of Trudeau, but he mentioned, he personally knew about half a dozen, 6, 7, or 8 different people whose businesses got shut down because they couldn't have 2 official languages. So for the Westerners, that's a big issue. They're so far removed from what Quebec is that to have 2 languages is almost absurd for them. It's a little bit more understandable for the people in the East. I mean, New Brunswick, for instance, is really probably the only truly bilingual country there is. Quebec is predominantly French, and everywhere else is predominantly English. But speaking about the East, for instance, I mentioned the Eastern chip on their shoulders, and that specifically stands with New Brunswick and PEI. New Brunswick, they're a bit more blue collar, but more hard. They're one of the hard luck provinces, if you can put it that way. Their economy is not the strongest, and I think there's a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, or a little bit of resentment toward the rest of Canada, and that's what I got from talking with one family that had us over for dinner there when we were in New Brunswick touring. But on that same tour last winter, when we went to PEI, we actually did our show there at the time, which was about Confederation. It was a bit of a lighter piece, a bit geared towards younger audiences, and it kind of had a bit of an allegory about Confederating Canada and a form of a game show. And it focused on the story of John A. We said one of the lines in the song was, "There are millions of stories," but we're just going to tell Sir John A. Macdonald's story, essentially. But we made the mistake, obviously, of going to the East at the time. This is something we learned on the road, and something I took to heart on this tour, was when we went out there out East, we didn't even mention, figures that were important to them, like, Charles Tupper, Leonard Tilley, Joseph Howe, or anything like that. We went out to PEI. This is in New Brunswick, actually. Forgive me, sorry. In New Brunswick, we went and we did a community show. And the New Brunswicker there, a man showed up who was part of a theater company there, the Califumpians, I think they were called. Not fully sure on that, but he sat down with a scowl on his face, like, oh boy, like, let me see what they got. And I remember I spoke to him before the show and welcomed him, and I said, I hope you enjoy the show. He's like, yeah, I hope so too. So I said, okay, wow. This guy looks like he's made up his mind about this. So we saw the show, and afterwards he sat there, and he raised his hand. He said, "You know what?" He goes, "You didn't mention any of the figures from East Coast history, the ones I just mentioned." He said, "In fact, you know what? You guys have a very upper Canadian-centered view, or as we like to put it, uppity Canadians." And that was the first time we ever caught any kind of opposition from any of our audiences. And he said, "Don't even take this show to PEI." He said, "They'll run you right out of town." Because, in PEI's mind, I believe that they feel, a little bit duped into Confederation. Like Johnny MacDonald and his friends, showed up on the boat, the SS Victoria or whatever it was. They showed up with crates and crates of champagne on a summit that was supposed to be about Eastern maritime issues, and he showed up and sort of crashed the party. Got everyone, feeling good, nice and lubricated, and chatted everybody up and sort of hijacked the whole summit. And then, enough buzz was created that they had another conference in Quebec a couple of years later, and then eventually in London. But so I think they're still a bit sore about that. So, bottom line is Confederation is contentious, and people need to understand where we came from, because they need to know that these problems that are happening now are not new. It's happening all around us, and how are we ever going to learn? Classic adage. How are we ever going to learn about the mistakes? How are we ever going to learn from the mistakes of the past? Or how are we, sorry, butchering that quote. But you know how it goes. If you can't learn from the mistakes of the past, you're doomed to repeat them. And Canada needs to absolutely avoid that. Another good point that one of my colleagues pointed out today, Jesse McMillan, he mentioned about, in an adult life, you'd expect that an adult would make better decisions later in their life, right? When you're young, a child, an infant, a teenager, you're not that informed. You don't have a lot of life experience. The idea is that as you get older, you make better decisions, more informed decisions. You have more experience. You can look at Canada, our nation, in the exact same way. There were things that were done in the past, maybe weren't handled the best, and arguably there are still things today that aren't being handled the best. But like I said, learn about the past, and maybe those mistakes won't happen. At least, hopefully, not to the degree that they sometimes have. But another thing I want to point out is that in school, it doesn't seem there's as large a stress on history as an essential subject as a math or a science, for instance. And I've been out of the school system for a bit now. I'm 24, but back in high school, I remember when I stopped taking sciences and math after grade 10, because I wanted to focus on the arts and the social sciences. I studied drama at Queen's University actually for 4 years, so I knew early on what I wanted to do and what field of study I wanted to pursue. But I dropped all my sciences and maths, and the guidance teacher looked at me in disbelief, like I was crazy. And I believe her quote was something along the lines of, "Wow, you're gonna take histories and stuff, and law, or histories and whatever it was, and art. Like, we can only be a police officer or a high school teacher with that kind of stuff." And I said, "Come on." I didn't buy that for a second. I said, there are way more careers associated with that than you're giving this credit for right now. But the point is that people don't view the social sciences, especially history, as an essential topic. Yes, all the focus is on math, is on science, is on law, is on all these big time 6-figure salary jobs and whatnot. But what about the historians? Who's growing up to be a historian? Who's growing up to study history or take an interest in our past? There's a possibility that the great lessons from our past, who we are, all the old dusty, musty books, which are all being traded in for Kindles now and whatever, that could be lost. And if no one keeps track of our history, then how are future generations going to know who we are? So it bothers me that history isn't seen as an essential topic. In the USA, for instance, I'm surprised it's gotten me up till this point to mention the USA and their view on history, because they have a completely opposite view of history than us. Whereas it's probably too much in the one direction for the States, where they deify their figures in history. They revere them to an extent almost ad nauseum. It's too much. And in Canada, we're embarrassed of it. We don't talk about it at all. In fact, we don't like to put anybody on a pedestal in Canada. It's like, you're fine as long as you're with the group and one of everybody else. But as soon as you do something great, achieve something, you stick your head up above the rest of the poppies, you get it cut off. So it's the complete opposite. We don't want to go quite what the States is doing. They have, that famous painting, what is it? The apotheosis of George Washington. They believe their founding father never even died. Or never even was buried. He just died and ascended to heaven, like a saint. He just became a god. We don't want to do that. Because we want to look at both sides of our founding fathers, our historical figures, everyone. We want to, because that makes them more relatable. It makes them more human. When Johnny MacDonald wasn't a perfect guy, and he'd probably be the first person to admit it, it's a little bit easier to understand and grasp it and relate to it. And something else which I just reminded myself of is, relating to our history is something that's different. I mean, you know, you can look at the States and Canada as two separate entities, whereas the States being a revolutionary country and Canada being an evolutionary country. You know, whereas the States, they started with a bang, you know, like a boom, a war, bloodshed, fighting. They ripped their independence away from the hands of the crown, the British crown, and they had it, you know, liberty, independence, justice for all, equality for all. It was all there, you know, liberty. It's a word it's a word that they have attached to their manifestos that you don't see in early Canadian documents or ever associated with Canada at all. That's something they have, and it started with a bang, and it's sustained itself throughout. That's what America is. With Canada, however, it came together through not on a battlefield, but through the intense compromise of a lot of different people in the back rooms, you know, in the hallways at Parliament. You know, this is where Canada was formed, through compromise. You know, meeting halfway. It was maybe one of the greatest compromises in history, and that's impressive about it. But Canada has evolved so much from then. I mean, they just got themselves together as a country, and they've come so far. And Canada's continually evolving. Some might argue we're not even there, haven't reached the Canada that we could be yet. We're still such a young nation. You know, we maybe haven't even reached the Canada that our founding fathers envisioned. You know, I'm sure they obviously didn't know what the future held, but they were visionaries enough. I truly believe Macdonald was a visionary like that. You know, that they knew that if they gave this country a spark and just started it, you know, it could go on and become something great. And we're still getting to that point. So the farther we get from Confederation, the closer we get to what we're trying to achieve, the end goal of Canada, whenever that is, wherever that is, we identify less and less with where we came from. Since it's evolved and changed so much, John A. Macdonald's Canada seems like a foreign concept to a lot of modern Canadians now. They don't identify with it. Yet, as I just pointed out earlier, John A. Macdonald's Canada is still very much our own. Whether you like it or not, Canada hasn't changed as much as you think. And John A. Macdonald is, in my opinion, arguably one of the most influential Canadians of all time. For better or for worse, as I always say, as I've said in previous interviews. For better or for worse, he influenced so much about what Canada is now. You know, and not just I'm talking about not just the geographic issues, you know, the economic issues, stuff like the banking laws, you know, the Coast Guard, the RCMP, you know, our entire Constitution, for goodness sakes, which he wrote himself. You know, he contributed something like 60 of the 72 resolutions initially. You know, so he contributed so much to what we have now, all the good stuff, and unfortunately a lot of the bad stuff too. That it's just been ingrained. You know, some people, you know, label Canada as having, you know, systemic racism in there, you know, institutional racism. And, you know, some people, you can trace that back to Macdonald. There are certain things in his policy, you know, the Indian Act, stuff that has been long-standing, that has really affected what Canada is today. So that's why it's so important, and I can't speak enough about it, how important it is to learn about the past and where we came from. You know, last point I'll make is just that we're not just teaching history; it's about teaching lessons from history, and that's something that actually just came up the other day. Anna, who I mentioned already, a fellow castmate of mine, we were having a question and answer period for some high school kids, and the one girl raised up her hand and asked, "Do you find it boring working with history?" And we all said, "Of course, no." Well, obviously, we wouldn't be doing this if we thought it was boring, you know. And we have learned about history in boring ways in the past. So we do our very best to understand the youth and try to understand what it is they want, what's cool to them, what's palatable, what can we engage them with. So, and Anna made the great point of saying, we're not teaching history, we're teaching lessons. Like, you know, it's like morality. It's like a morality play. I mean, the play we did this past winter was about John A. Macdonald's early life. It also had a voting aspect. It was like the part one to our Western show, which is now dealing with the railway and issues surrounding that. But the first show we did was about John A. Macdonald coming of age, becoming a lawyer, you know, getting into politics and learning the lesson of accountability. That was the whole thing of the play. You know, we used the allegory of the windmills. He brought in windmills, which is, you know, can be construed as the railway. But these windmills were supposed to, he framed them as providing food and drinking water and jobs for people and everything. But a lot of his best friends ended up being negatively affected by the windmills. And at the end, you know, after the kids had voted on the windmills, after Johnny framed it so well, at the very end, when all his friends were like, well, all this stuff affected us. You know, it closed my business, it ruined my view, it destroyed my lawn, whatever it was. He said, it wasn't me, it was them. It was the people. All these kids voted for it. Blame them. They're to blame for the windmills. And that's when the kids, that was the aha teaching moment for the kids, to be like, just no. Like, it's a multi-level lesson. It's being that this guy's not being accountable right now. He's blaming it on us. But we were the ones who voted. But also showing the importance of doing your research, your due diligence, and understanding what people's platforms are, and what is going on politically. Again, it goes back to your civic duty. Be engaged in the system of government, in the democratic process. So that kind of let these kids know that, oh wow, it seemed like such a good idea when he laid it out for you, right? But obviously he would lay it out in the best way possible. So that play, for instance, was in a lot of ways a morality play. It dealt with accountability. It was not so much about history. There were historical events in it. We used historical characters, but it was more about teaching a lesson that is timeless. And we like to think that a lot of our other plays and works we do have lessons that are timeless in there. We use the historical figures, to bring the story alive and find some way to connect it. But if you stripped away the characters, who they are, and just gave them any old name, Joe, Barbara, Mike Smith, whatever, it would have the same effect. You'd learn the same lessons, and that's the key part. We're not just teaching history, we're teaching lessons learned through history. But about it being boring, that brings me to a great other point here with the youth and the history and the outlook or the perspective from our youth. History isn't boring. I mean, I mentioned that Canada was formed in the back rooms through intense compromise, and so many people laid down so much, big egos, people put their big egos aside and got together and actually dared a group of disorganized British colonies to be something great. Everybody could have had their own little section of the land here and done their own little thing, but people got together. MacDonald, one of the main minds in this, said, let's think bigger than we've ever thought before. And our history is so fascinating. Yeah, it's not like American history. It's not like British history. It's not like Italian history. It doesn't have, great, fantastic works of art in it, or a Renaissance. It doesn't have any kind of wars. It doesn't have any kind of longevity or extensive history that the British Empire does, or even going back to Rome. But that's okay, because it's not American history. It's not Italian history. It's not British history. It's Canadian history. It's our own history, and it's so unique to us that should be celebrated. That should be recognized for what it is. So I don't want to generalize here with the youth and say there's no interest in history amongst the youth, but as I mentioned before, there's not a large stress on it. There's not in the schools. There's not a lot outside the schools. A lot of people's parents come from a generation where history was completely, it was nothing. I speak to some people's parents. I know my own parents. They say growing up it was American history, British history, and etc. There's no Canadian history. You don't learn about that stuff. Like more Canadians can tell you who the first president is, opposed to our first president, which some people would say, which is of course a total disgrace. That people don't even know we have a prime minister. Like, that's just, what is that? Like, you're not doing any kind of civic duty right now. So it's frustrating, really. As mentioned, voter turnout in Canada is lower than it's ever been. It's hitting record lows. And that's a problem, A lot of these votes that we've had with Johnny MacDonald, guilty or not guilty, sometimes, he gets voted not guilty or guilty on charges that he should be found guilty for or should be found not guilty for. But people don't vote, so it doesn't go a certain way. And we say, you know what, you could have swayed that. You guys could have swayed that and changed it, but you didn't, and I have to suffer with the consequences. And maybe on charges you thought, this MacDonald guy seems like a bit of a jerk. They thought he was guilty, but he didn't vote. So guess what? He got away not guilty on all 3 charges, and that's it. It's just about students taking the situation for granted. As I mentioned, it's taking democracy for granted. The fact that even with Johnny MacDonald, people in this past couple of years have been totally on board with criticizing Johnny MacDonald. Some people call him a glorious father of Confederation, a progressive mind, the man who made us, a true visionary. Some people call him a drunk, racist, genocidal maniac, and I myself I find MacDonald an admirable figure. I also play Johnny MacDonald, but I didn't always play him. I played other characters around him, but I've come to have such a profound respect for him through learning about him. And yeah, he wasn't perfect. And yeah, he made mistakes, and there were negative consequences to his actions. Absolutely. And I'll acknowledge and own those completely, because that contributes to who we are. But what he did, there has hardly been as cunning and ruthless a political operator as Sir Johnny MacDonald was. He was just off the charts in that way. What he did, what he accomplished, what one man accomplished. So in that sense, I'm more on the side of McDonald. But I used to point out during McDonald week, to people who would absolutely despise McDonald and just tear him apart. I would say, but isn't it great though that you live in a country where if you don't like your founding father or political figure, you can speak out against them. You can hold a protest. You can publicly defame that politician's character. You could do just a lot of things that they like, and there's no fear of anyone coming to your house and grabbing you in the middle of the night, shooting you, stringing you up, or hanging you. Nothing like that. Because why? Because we live in one of the greatest countries in the world. And why is it one of the greatest countries in the world? Because it was allowed to be through the foresight of several important politicians that took it upon themselves to turn this country into something unimaginable. Look at it now. I mean, it's so complicated. History is the most complicated thing to understand our history. The more you learn about it, the more you realize it's not black and white. There's two sides to it all. I mean, was the railway, did it have negative impacts upon the indigenous peoples of the plains? Yes. Did it disrupt their life? Yes. Did it completely mess up the way the Métis divided their land? Absolutely. Were Chinese workers underpaid, starved, underappreciated, sent away? Yes. Did the railway keep out the Americans and prevent us from being invaded and turned into another state in the USA? Perhaps it did. We'll never know because it never got to that point. But McDonald and these guys were acting upon a time limit, a time frame. Manifest Destiny was a real thing. The Civil War was over, and the states had just finished, defeating the Confederates, and they now had the largest, best trained, most lethal fighting force the world had ever seen. I mean, it puts anything the British had before that to shame. It puts anything the Romans had to shame. It was the largest, best trained fighting force in the world at the time, and they were hungry for more territory. And it was a thing of the essence. So, was the railway good, great for Canada? Did it unite us? Yes. Was it, as some kids have pointed out in our show, could it have been done with more consideration? Probably. Was that a luxury that they had time to take the consideration? Probably not. So you start to see how Canada has such a complicated history. I mean, even now I'm getting all riled up talking about it, but that's just because I love Canadian history. I think it's so fascinating. I mean, yeah, I love McDonald, but I also love Louis Riel. I also love all the other figures in our history that, may have opposed him or are controversial or whatnot. I mean, McDonald himself is controversial. It's just all so fascinating, where we came from. It's absolutely wonderful, and something else you got to see with the youth is that there's different ways of learning, right? I mean, history, as I mentioned, history isn't boring. It's sometimes just taught in boring ways. And the best way for people to learn is not always through black and white, two-dimensional pictures in textbooks, I mean, I never had that extensive Canadian history unit growing up, I mean, I didn't know much about McDonald until I got this job, and I was a fairly involved student, and I did like history and engaged with it more than the average bear, I think. But there's different ways of learning for kids, and something that we have latched onto is our approach toward this. What is what we do, which we think is essential for teaching about history. This is the marriage of history and art right here. I mean, you can check out our stuff online, absolutely. But some of the stuff we do, like we do quick-paced, high-energy theatrical performances. It's they're quick, they're snappy. Like I said, it's fluid, it's flexible, it flows into one another. It's snappy, scene changes, quick character changes. Very dynamic. And I've had the privilege of working with some absolutely fantastic actors. A lot of them I still do work with in the current company right now. People who bring so much to the stage, so much with their performances. Not just their vocal ability, and intelligence, but their commitment, their dedication, the way they read the crowd. And we've been blessed with having a really strong group of people to carry out this unique type of theater that we do. Something I think that is important that you shouldn't underestimate is the presence of comedy in what you do. All our shows usually have comedic elements to them. They're definitely irreverent. I mean, irreverence is something that really disarms people, I think, and brings them into what it is you're doing. I mean, that's the kind of thing that maybe lacks in some of the American depictions of their own history. There's so much reverence there that you don't really want to delve into what that legacy is. You don't want to poke and prod and too much at George Washington or whoever, lest you find something bad. lest you dig up some kind of dirt and offend someone, or worse, be called un-American or something, unpatriotic, So here we kind of disarm the audience and say, it's okay to laugh at or with these figures. I mean, we never do anything incredibly disrespectful, but kind of bring the characters down to a bit of a more relatable level. I mean, we filmed a little video at the Calgary Expo. Is a Comic Con, is a comic convention, with superheroes, people dressed as superheroes, and we showed up in costume to do a little thing, and we had Johnny McDonald and Louis Riel, two men who despise each other, though never met. We had them interacting with each other, talking about the Rebel Alliance, the Star Wars, and Johnny McDonald for the Empire, the British Empire, and they're kind of just jabbing at each other and having some fun. Louis Riel was trying to find Chewbacca because he's a big fan, and that's just kind of the playful irreverence that we do that kind of lets people say, oh yeah, it's okay to engage with these characters, and they're not perfect, and they're not trying to be portrayed as being perfect. And I think that's really refreshing to see, and always a self-awareness of what we do. That's something that we feel is essential. We know that historical shows and historical-based theater and stuff like this, educational theater, it can be sometimes get the stereotype of being hokey, or it's just childish or immature, and it's just, and we're aware of that. So, I mean, we ourselves have seen our fair share of youth theater, theater for young audiences, and educational theater, and I think we know what not to do and how to really kind of get at the kids. And, I mean, there's always going to be kids who aren't going to engage, but they're becoming increasingly in the minority the more shows we do. The better we get at our craft of reaching these kids and finding ways to talk to these kids, in ways that they understand, but also as adults. And there's, I guess, a self-awareness of what we do. There's something happens on stage, a little thing. I mean, we're aware of what it is we're doing, and sometimes the characters have this sort of self-aware, sort of comedic flair to them, which is awesome. And again, music is a heavy component in all the work we do. There's a picture of us right there. There's me as Johnny McDonald and Anna Sudek as Calvin Hobbes, and our newest addition, Lauren Castleman, playing Isabella McDonald in that photo. And we write all our own songs, which is awesome. Maybe later we'll get a chance to hear one of them. But the songs are great. I mean, again, the songs are funny. They're, at least we think they are, and they're a great way to learn. The songs are a great way to learn in general. I mean, they allow people, especially the youth, to learn and retain information in small, digestible patterns, I guess you could say. I mean, most people, there's a lot of people that can't recite, our 22 prime ministers in a row. But I bet you, 90% of those people can list off all the lyrics to Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus, or some other tune that's popular now, or whatever, you know what I mean? Or Don't Stop Believing, by Journey or whatever. Like, people can memorize lyrics to songs, no problem. When it comes to memorizing facts or important stuff about our history or our past, it's just, there's not the same kind of enjoyment. Well, obviously not. I mean, who's going to want to try and memorize a textbook, right? So that's our goal, is then to put that textbook information into song, into some kind of form of multimedia, something digestible and tight and funny, so it's, and I say it's self-aware. It's having a lot of these songs, and I hope you get a chance to check out some of the stuff we do, and I hope the clip on here works, as we have later, because that's a great example. It's just a great way to learn. I mean, people snap up. We do dancing on stage. We have choreographed stuff, and whenever we feel passionate about a subject, I mean, the fact that our company is completely autonomous, I mean, we do everything ourselves. And we direct it, we write it, we make the music, make the props, set, travel, everything we do. So if someone feels passionate about a new subject, we'll write a song about that, write a scene about it. We'll do it. Like, I've written songs about Darcy McGee, about the streets, the names behind the streets in Kingston. I've written a song about all 22 prime ministers, which is called the Prime Minister Song, which I encourage you to check out online, because one of our company members, Jesse, did a great animated video for it. And that's probably a great example of some of the kitschy kind of, fun stuff we do. It lists all the prime ministers in a row, and it's accompanied by a really cool kind of animated video. So that's a fun one, and it's educational too. You learn that song, you learn all the prime ministers. I mean, now everyone in the company knows all 22 prime ministers. I mean, I didn't even know them all before I wrote that song, but I wrote it, and the chorus is, from prime ministers that you may never know, so come along and learn the song. You learn them all, and you do, and that's the best thing about it. Is like people then start to know. They'll learn about the streets in Kings. They'll learn about whatever it is we do. They'll be like, oh yeah, and they'll be humming those songs after. And that's what I say is people, they're tapping their foot, they're humming along, they're snapping their fingers, they're bopping to the beat, singing along, catching the chorus up when they can, and then before you know it, hey, you're learning. Welcome to the club. And it's a really great way to connect. So yes, theater is awesome. Theater is great. Performance is great. It's a real treat seeing these black and white, two-dimensional historical figures printed on paper and money come to life before your very eyes. But it's even cooler to see them sing songs and dance around and do that kind of stuff, and it really makes for a memorable experience. And speaking of memorable experiences, an example to this is something, for instance. Excuse me. We did a school in Kingston, Sir John A. Macdonald Public School, and I played George Brown in that show at the time. I had big mutton chops, and I played George Brown up. He's kind of like a super villain in the show. He's kind of played up like a Grinch kind of character. I had the big the slinking kind of walk, the dark circles under the eyes, the deep raspy kind of Scottish accent there. And it was kind of had the evil laugh, and he's kind of almost a cartoon character. That's something you've seen out of Looney Tunes. But I played that character, and it was great. And then we did it for a bunch of kids, and we got a tour of the school afterwards. And it was the grade 2s that saw it that day. And these grade 2s, they saw us in the hallways walking around, and they absolutely mobbed us for autographs. Me specifically, they were looking for, because I just happened to catch the eye of this one classroom. They all came running out at me and what did they say when they came running out for autographs? They said, Mr. Brown, Mr. George Brown, sign my autograph. And to me, that was, I'll never forget that. That was one of the greatest moments for me in this entire job. Because not that I got mobbed for autographs. I mean, yes, it's always fun and awesome to sign an autograph for somebody, but I mean, they're grade 2s, right? They're just little kids. It's just, to us, to them, we're celebrities, which is what we want, because we want them to think that it's cool. We want them to be engaged. That's why we sent around educational videos beforehand that we created ourselves to make them think, we're kind of like, not like movie stars, but kind of think we're larger than life. So then they listen to what we say. We're cool. It's accessible. They're engaged right off the bat. We don't have to win them over at all. They're won over before we even get there. So the coolest part was not getting mobbed for autographs by grade 2s, but was the fact that all these grade 2s came running out at me, and they all knew George Brown, the name George Brown. Whether they were fully aware of who George Brown was in the grand scheme of that play, they knew the name, and they liked my rendition or character enough to come and ask me for an autograph. That was perfect, because those are the same kids that are going to go home and research George Brown, or look up that name and figure out who George Brown was. Or maybe they don't, but maybe they come across that name in a couple of years and they say, oh yeah, George Brown. I remember when this actor came to our school and he played George Brown. And I thought it was so cool, and now I'm going to read about this guy and figure out what he's all about. That's it. Like, that's what it is for me right there. When you get to that point, like, and you're engaging the youth and they know who these people are, they start to know. I mean, I didn't know who George Brown was till well into high school, I mean, I think I knew about George Brown College before I actually knew about George Brown the politician. So it was a huge moment for me to be like, here's this kid who's like, 15 years younger than when I first learned that name, and I had a large hand in doing that right now with us, and it's just, it's really cool, I think, and that's all the payment I need from this job sometimes. It's just to know that we're getting it across, because I really do feel passionately about learning about our past. I mean, like I said, we don't expect you. Yeah, I don't care whether you like John A. Macdonald or not. That's your decision, or like whoever we're talking about. Our goal is just to bring you to the information, to let you know who John A. Macdonald was. You decide if you like him or not. Who Louis Riel was. You decide if you like him or not. You decide if you think the railway was a good idea or a bad idea. But know about it. But learn about it. Dive in and research. That's what we do. We bring people to the information, and that's where that's our genre, historical fiction. We don't do history plays. We do historical fiction plays. Is there a difference? In my mind, yes. And I'll tell you, history plays, and that's just regurgitating facts. That's just theatricalizing history. Whereas we take historical fiction, we mix fiction with the facts to create a good story, an engaging story, a drama, a comedy, whatever it is. There's always conflict in a drama, in a proper drama. And we take, like I said, about the morality play, about the accountability, Johnny McDonald and the windmills. Yes, we use historical facts to inspire it. Yes, did Johnny McDonald ever campaign on windmills? No. Was there an election here? Was the water dirty in Kingston, and that was a big problem? Yes. It was. Did McDonald have people named George Mackenzie, his law mentor, and Eliza Grimison, tavern owner, in his life? Yes, he did. Did he build a windmill that destroyed their properties? No. So we mix it, but that makes a great story, and it brings you to the point of what we want to do. Point sometimes is A, to teach a lesson, and B is to bring you to these figures, to these events, to these characters. Let you know who they are, and you can go off and hopefully be incited to research them further, engage with it further. And that's where you get to the whole artists as educators concept. Is that sometimes artists there's a real power in what artists do. They hold a real power over society at large. That's why, if you can go on a mega level right now, to the highest extreme, somebody like, Brad Pitt or Matt Damon or Cameron Diaz, whoever, these people, Madonna, whoever they are, these famous people, they recognize that they have star power, that, people will listen to them. They can use their celebrity status or their artistic mediums to create works that educate or teach on a subject that they feel passionate about. Whether it be conflicts in Darfur, or starving children in the third world, or overseas adoption, or about questioning the Bush administration. I don't know if you're Clooney. There's lots of things people do use their status, and that's not quite educating in the same way as we do, but it's similar. We use our medium, what we know best, to teach, because we know that entertainment and the arts is almost an essential in everyone's life. Everyone engages with arts in some kind of way. You listen to music, you watch movies, you go to the theater, whatever it is, you have paintings hanging in your house. You engage with art in some kind of way. It's a part of your life. And since everyone engages with it, if you can make that art somehow teach a lesson, educate about something that's important to who we are as a nation, I think you're really hitting the nail on the head. I think that's what it's all about. And the last thing I'll say is about engaging form. Is we like to create theater, like I said, in unconventional spaces, anything but a theater. We want people to engage with theater in any way except for sitting in a dark theater for 2 hours, which is why I have the McDonald Cartier project here, which was a site-specific play we did. Site-specific environmental theater is where the audience moves about within a space as the actors occupy it at the same time. So we had a large Victorian-type house, 1840s rather, and the actors moved about. It was set at the London Conference, and it focused on the personal dramas between Johnny McDonald and George Etienne Cartier, which we put on for Cartier's 200th birthday himself on September 6th this past year. And I just focused on, as the guys were all there, putting the finishing touches on Confederation, the personal dramas that, arose from that. There was McDonald, there was Cartier, there was Brown, there was Lady Agnes McDonald, there was Cartier's mistress, Luz Cuvier, there was the Duke who was in charge of it, and the actors moved around, they played piano, they danced, they sang, they ate a full meal in front of everybody. It was set against the backdrop of the signing of the B&A Act and the Confederation of Canada, the sealing of the deal. But that was just in the background, it was really about the personal dramas, about, McDonald being too shy to ask Agnes to marry him. So Cartier's trying to be the ladies' man and help him out. Cartier's there with his mistress, and he's taking flack from the Duke for having this, illegitimate wife. Cartier and McDonald are the best of friends, and he's helping him. But then when McDonald gets the knighthood, Cartier hears about that, and they have a bit of a falling out. George Brown is there digging away for trying to find out about John A.'s scandal with the American money and the railway. So there's all this personal drama. It was almost like a Downton Abbey or like a Clue almost. It was like very much rooted in the personal dramas of these characters. Yes, we fictionalized a lot of it. Did we draw upon history? Absolutely. Was it based around historical facts, loosely based? Sometimes yes. Sometimes very hardly based on the facts. It's very specific. But that's what you do. No one wants to hear a history book regurgitated on stage. They want to know about the personal dramas. If I want to know what Johnny McDonald and Cartier achieved in their political life, I can read about it. Do I want to know, what kind of bedfellows, Cartier and Louis Cuvier are? Do I want to know how Johnny McDonald interacts at the dinner when he's trying to be sober? Do I want to see what happens when two best friends fight? Absolutely. That's interesting stuff. And if that gets you engaged in the history enough to look it up yourself, then I think we've done a pretty good job on that. So on that note, that's just a bit about me speaking about what it is we do, the importance of linking history with art, and how history is an essential subject to learn, and art is an absolutely essential way to learn it through. Now, if possible, I'm going to see if maybe we have some video here, some stuff put up. Now it looks like it's going. There's.
Paul, I have the audio clip for you, but not the video clip.
Okay, perfect. I'll just go over to that then.
Okay, well, I have to upload it just like I uploaded the PowerPoint, so I can do that for you.
I was going to try and show a video clip, which is, unfortunately, is not able to be loaded right now. I was a little bit slow on getting it there. It was a bit of an afterthought, but hopefully we're going to get a song hooked up here in just a second. But if you'd like to check out any of the other stuff we've done, I mean, YouTube has a large portion of what we do. Here's the song right here. Now this is looks like it's good to play. I'll just play this in a second. But this is a great example, for instance, of some of the work we do. This has a song. We just recorded this a couple weeks ago. Our full company's got all 5 actors in the company singing trading parts on it, and it's the British Subjects Rap. It's a song I wrote 2 summers ago. Lord Sydenham is a big figure in Kingston. He's the first Governor General of the United Province of Canada, or the first GG of the UPC, as we call it. And that was 1841. So I basically run you down the list of the 7 governor generals that occurred between 1841 leading up to 1867, and some of the funny, comical history around them. So it's a bit of a wrap. So it's only about like 2.5 minutes long. So if you want to bear with me and check this out, it'll be a good example of some of the stuff we do. So hopefully you can hear this.
For the love of the Queen, somebody drop me a beat. That's it. Here we go. Love the British crown and help you break it down. I'm Lord Sydenham, I'm the best. The first GG of the UPC. I made it happen with my cred. With sense playing Britain to enforce what Durham said. Upper can and lower can. Truth be told, but you couldn't be slower, man. Informing of this nation's no cooperation and too much hesitation. A British subject I was born, a British subject I will die. That's what Johnny said to me. Be faithful to the monarchy. But the Queen can't be here, so she sends a Governor General, the man who made Kingston the capital. You love it, you want more on it. Short, it was thinking, and I was drinking. Hobnobbing pretty hard, hanging with some women. Fell on my horse, broke my neck, hit my head. Was trying to find blocks, and I ended up dead. I had my fall, went City Hall, and now I'm buried under the floor of the cathedral. St. George's, what vermin, said I wouldn't be back to hear another sermon. A British subject I was born, a British subject I will die. That's what Johnny said to me, be faithful to the monarchy. But the Queen can't be here, so she sends a Governor General, the man who made Kingston the capital. But there was more. But don't forget about us, I was number 2. Sir Charles Bacon, coming right at you. My term in office was never shorter. My claim to fame was undefended border. Now at number 3, well that's me. Sir Charles Metcalf, political prodigy. I know your methods, and you can try, but responsible government is never gonna fly. Cathcart, and 4. I left just as soon as I walked through the door. And now at number 5, the Earl of Elgin. I stormed through Asia, claimed destruction. Sir Edmund Walker Head. Number 6, I never made my bed. Too good for that stuff, I got things to do. Did you hear I was a pretty good author too?
No one cares about that, they care about this.
man who made Kingston the capital. The man who made Kingston the capital. The man who made Canada happen, yo. Word to your mother country.
Awesome. Well, there you go. There you have it. That is an example of one of the songs from our past summer season. Thank you. There's 11 songs coming. Actually, they're all going to be on our Bandcamp. It's going to be at salontheatre.bandcamp.com, I believe. And I encourage you to check out salontheatre.ca for links to our YouTube channel. Lots of great educational videos on there, music videos, all that sort of good stuff. Social media, we're on Twitter, Facebook, and everything. So yeah, I hope you do that. And if anyone has any questions, I would absolutely love to field them or have a chat or a bit of a discussion. If anyone's feeling that, I want to thank you all for sticking around and listening. Hopefully you got something from it and whatnot. But any questions or comments, feel free to shoot. I'm all yours. Floor is open. I'd be pleased. Do I plan to play in Ottawa? Interesting, actually. We were just asked to play an event on May 1st called National Capital History Day. And since we're on tour right now, we were unable to do it. So we sent a little video greeting instead. But hopefully we can make it there next year for about May 1st for National Capital History Day. But besides that, after this tour is done, we're going to get to work planning our next tour, which won't be a national tour. We're going to focus our funding in on a regional tour. So we're talking about Kingston, Frontenac County, and everywhere pretty much along the 401 between Toronto and Ottawa. So we hope to hit quite an extensive school tour, probably about 6 weeks between Toronto and Ottawa. So look for us, January through February of 2016. And all the updates will be on our website and through our social media. Once again, we're Salon Theatre, so just keep up to date on that kind of stuff. And we're definitely going to be coming to a venue near you shortly.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Paul. You play a lot in schools. Do you play public venues as well?
Yes, we do. The school tours have only been a portion of our yearly programming. We do a summer show. It's an outdoor theater show. It has been a walk in Sir John A. Footsteps. It has been a walking tour in previous years, and it goes all summer. July 1st right through to Labor Day. And an element of that, it's all outdoors. It's a walking tour. It's an outdoor theater show. It's like vignettes and songs done in the public, against the facades of various buildings to enhance the story. We go all over the place. So, as I mentioned, our flexibility as a company and our fluidity. We often do a lot of outdoor performances and public playing. We are speaking of Ottawa, we were at the Frontenac Mall, the Rideau Mall in Ottawa a little while ago, playing a public performance there. It's just free. We're doing a couple outdoor shows in Vancouver, Canada Place. Like I said, we do stuff all summer, and when we're not doing the walking tours or the outdoor theater shows, which run twice a day in the summer, you can usually find us in the park rehearsing, playing theater games, engaging kids, playing with sets at the front of City Hall, over at the train, down by the water. Kind of just one of the parts of our agreement of the summer is to animate the downtown. So we often do public performances, and we love it. It's great to play off the passersby.
Fabulous. I'm hoping to make it down there or over
July 1st, actually, till the end of September 27th. And our shows will be at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday. And again, that should be all on the website and everything, but this year it's going to be a bit less of a walking tour, a little more of a stationary show, still some moving about and, characters popping out at you as you go, but it should be a bit more of an outdoor theater show this time. So looking forward to that. And if anyone's around the Kingston area, please stop by. It was voted the #1 tourism attraction on TripAdvisor, if you don't mind that little plug there.
No problem at all. All right, I think we'll call it a night. Thank you, Paul, for your presentation. Thank you, everybody, for coming.